Thank you very much, Michelle Ngela. It's now time for The Way It Is. And it is, well, in studio, we have Senator Elizabeth Ongoro, lawyer Ambrose Weda, and Dr. James Nyoro, the running mate for Ferdinand Waititu in the Kiambu gubernatorial race. Well, ladies and gentlemen, welcome. And this is The Way It Is. Of course, it's been a very active weekend with only 35 days to go before we get to the general election. We know that it is very busy for all politicians right now. And one of the things that, of course, has been a subject and a bone of contention in both sides of the political divide is matters to do with corruption. Let me start with you, Dr. Nyoro, on whether you see a way forward in solving this ugly head of corruption that has been talked about left, right, and center. Now, right now, we have both sides of the divide accusing each other of being corrupt.
Well, when I look at the situation as it is right now, you realize that there's accusation and counter-accusations. And, you know, one side says you are involved in Mescado, you are involved in what, you are involved, and then the other side is saying, oh, look, you know, we are going to do ABCD. For me, I think what is most important is to see that fighting of corruption in this country is going to be bipartisan. It's not going to be one side. It's going to be, once we are through with this election, I think we have to get to a point where, as a country, we sit down and say, how do we change our part of the Constitution, including Chapter 6, in terms of integrity? You saw there were politicians who were accused of certain things, but they could not be stopped because of the process. Because the process says you are innocent until proven guilty. So there are certain systems that we, as a bipartisan society, must sit together and say, so-and-so needs to be penalized, so-and-so should be in jail, and so on and so forth. But I don't think it's going to be either this side or that side, because I think they are tainted in one way or the other.
So is the problem the process or the people?
It's both. If you look at the process, and if you remember, you know, the processes that we have gone through of investigation, and then once you are investigated, taken to court, what happens in the prosecution, what happens to judges, and so on, at what point are you going to move from being innocent to become guilty? And then what happens after that? It's that process. It's also the people. Because if you look back, you know, go back 50-something years ago, tell me somebody who has been put in jail because you are so corrupt that today, you as Michael will say, I will never touch corruption because so-and-so has suffered so much.
They've gone as an example.
Exactly.
Senator, your thoughts on this, because we have NASA accusing Jubilee of corruption, but when we look at some of the counties that NASA or ODM was in charge of, they've not been that vocal about corruption. So we're left thinking as Kenyans, at the end of the day, is it just going to be a blame game and, like they say, wanapita katikati yetu na haonekani?
Thank you very much. And I want to start by agreeing with Mr. Nyoro that every Kenyan has got a responsibility towards the eradication of corruption. But the truth is, leadership is very, very important in this. Just like in a family, you will not teach your children to practice what you're not practicing. And they learn by example. And so something has got to be done at the top because the buck stops somewhere. And when the opposition talks about corruption, and then you find that eventually the narrative becomes counter with the opposition also being accused, you are left wondering, when we talk about corruption, and we have classic examples, and we're talking about a government in place, those who have been given the mandate to lead, to prosecute, to ensure that those who have been involved are prosecuted to be used as examples by all Kenyans. And now we talk about it, and then they throw it back to us and say, no, 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 no. It's not that bad because even you guys are corrupt. Then you wonder who is supposed to be leading by example in this country. The opposition has not gotten that chance to lead or to execute its mandate or to allow Kenyans to enjoy its good policies. So when we talk about corruption and we are talking about classic examples, and then it is thrown back at us, then you, like in a school situation, when the headmaster is involved in some malpractice or is condoning malpractices from students, and when it is brought to the fore, then the narrative becomes, it's not that bad, anybody can do it, why didn't you do it? Then not everybody can be head teacher at the same time. So all we are saying is that this government had a grand opportunity to ensure zero tolerance of corruption, as they had promised. And they have not delivered on that promise.
But so did the opposition in the counties which they were taking care of. They had a grand opportunity to show by example, if we can manage a county, if we can manage the areas that we have jurisdiction over, then we are able to manage the nation.
I still want to state the opposition does not have a special judiciary to prosecute any one county.
But isn't that...
The opposition is part of this government that is, the structure that stops with the CEO. The opposition has not been given the mandate by Kenyans. Neither do they have the structures of governance. They don't have the resources.
But within the county government, they have the...
No. What we are, county governors are supposed to be exposed to the same process of prosecution as Mama Mboga, isn't it? If this government has got evidence that any one governor, and being in the opposition does not qualify anybody to be excused. So if this government has got evidence against any Kenyan governor or Mama Mboga, they should prosecute. This is what we are saying.
And I guess then the argument from the government will be then if the opposition has any evidence on any of the government machinery or any of the government officials, then they should go ahead and accuse, take them to court and prosecute. Whether, let me hear from you as a lawyer.
I hear this story that opposition, those who are now in opposition were in government. Powerful position, prime minister, vice president, cabinet. Do they have skeletons? Those three have named. So we can deal with corruption when people themselves confess and repent, especially those who have led and are viewed to have been involved in corruption. In fact, in this country, the top leadership, the only person who has not been accused to have directly involved himself in corruption is President Uhuru. But all these other dancers, you go to NYS, you go to Maize, you go to Triton, you go to molasses plant. So for us to deal with corruption, all of us, the Kenyan people need to be angry. They need to get angry. For now, we admire those who accumulate proceeds of corruption. In fact, we elect them to big offices, and we admire them and we love them. Until we reach where we are angry and we are able to tell ourselves this is wrong. If you look at governors, they have stolen, most of them have stolen left, right, and center and led a ragtag counties. But you never hear the opposition telling their own areas they control that this is bad. So why think the question of corruption should not be apportioned, especially when the apportioning is being done by leaders whose homes are established on land stolen from the public? That is very wrong. We need confession, repentance, and prayer and laying of hands. Then we can move together as a country.
But surely whether the back must stop somewhere, and the government has the machinery that it has necessary to ensure that they put a stop.
Now, let me speak as a lawyer. We actually are nostalgic. When we look at President Uhuru, we are very nostalgic. We wish he could do something. The new constitution took away all the powers. There is very little the president can do unless it turns like Magufuli, just talking and disobeying the law. Now, he cannot control the judiciary. He does not control the DPP. He does not control EACC. Even EACC will make recommendations that prosecute so-and-so and so-and-so. So they still go to DPP, and DPP says no. Even when DPP takes people, people like the governor of Kakamega, to court, the court can still, and court did still say, no, you can't prosecute these people. So turning around and saying President Uhuru would, even if Raila came with the other 4 dancers, there's very little they can do unless we amend the Constitution.
Senator, do you agree that, or rather, do you look at it as a lame excuse that the Constitution is now being blamed for the reason why the president cannot do much about corruption?
Of course, it's the blame game I was talking about. I want to take you back to 2002 when Kenyans themselves were arresting even policemen in traffic, in roadblocks, you know, when they attempted to solicit bribes. What changed that kind of, you know, situation? Is because the ordinary Mwananchi came to a point of realizing that while we are trying to come to a point of zero tolerance, every other day you read in the papers that somebody has stolen billions and gotten away with it. The buck stops with somebody. And if that is not the case, then we wouldn't even bother to be going for elections every 5 years to have a structure that stops with the CEO in this country. The blame game must stop. We have the president, we have the deputy president, they have all the instruments of power. They have everything it takes, including making very strong statements. And to say that it's only, and I don't want to really start mentioning the president's name, but let me tell you, when you don't have to be involved directly, but if you are adversely implicated in any issue, like the fiasco that was the Anne Waiguru and that other lady who was dragging money in gunny bags all over the place. What was her name? You know? And she actually comes forward and says, yes, I was given these monies to carry in gunny bags to so-and-so and to so-and-so and to so-and-so. And she didn't even deny it. And nothing is done about it. What does that state to the ordinary Mwananchi? And what narrative? What did we see the president, for example? Which statements can you know, when you try to recollect, what is the catching statement that he gave on that issue? You know, the buck stops with somebody.
Okay.
And when you are the CEO of a nation, when you are in charge of the governor, the government, when you have all these instruments of power, you cannot then, you know, start blaming the Constitution again. You know, I cannot
but
act
Senator,
because there's this and there's that.
The opposition...
This government is corrupt. They have failed to act on cases of corruption.
When we talk about instruments of power, what exactly are we talking about? Which instruments are we talking about? Because when we look at the 4 arms of government, when you look at the judiciary, when you look at all the instruments that are thought to be of power, the president cannot interfere with them directly.
No. I have been in Parliament, and I also know that the Constitution, as it was, we have aspects of the Constitution that have been so watered down by legislation. Legislation that has been introduced by legislators from the government side, government-sponsored, isn't it? So when you water down certain legislation, you know, but through legislation, you try to, you know, controlling and appreciating does not have to be direct.
What are some of those watered down legislations?
You know, I will not be able to present all of them here. But I know that, for example, when we talk about the judiciary, we talk about ESCC, we talk about commissions that are supposed to be absolutely independent. Even though we still want to accept, to believe that they are independent, the lawyer here knows that they are not that independent. Because when somebody tries to exercise their mandate as enshrined in the law, you find that something else is a stumbling block by way of legislation or by way of somebody being given a deputy who is receiving instructions from elsewhere, you know. Right. So you cannot execute your mandate under those circumstances.
Okay, Dr. Nyoro, I think Kenyans are getting sick and tired of hearing politicians, you know, regurgitate the same story, especially when it comes to corruption. It must stop somewhere. And we must agree that the reason why we have a government is for them to rule. Now, if they cannot rein in on corruption, can they at least accept and say we have failed when it comes to corruption?
You see, this is where I started. I mean, if you hear the narrative already here, it's all talking about the blame game. And this is where I started by saying what we need. First of all, if you know that the instruments of power that you are referring to are weak, if you know that today you are accused of having stolen 5 billion, and the first thing that you do is to rush to court and put in an injunction that you are not arrested, and you are given an injunction that you are not arrested because of the nature of those instruments, if you know that eventually you use the same money to corrupt yourself out of the accusation. So if you realize that the instruments are weak, if you realize that some of the people who are accusing the others have actually been caught up in worse situations, some of which includes international scandals, okay? If you realize that actually very few people are clean, either in the opposition or on this other side, totally clean to say that they are clean, then what we are talking about is a sick society. And what we need to do, and this is what I said earlier on when I started, is that we need a bipartisan approach because the Kenyans are tired. Because you start there and say so-and-so is corrupt. And yet, you are already benefiting from the corruption money from a particular county, and that's how you are fueling your campaign. How are you going to fight that particular corrupt governor if they have given you money to fuel your campaign? So we, as a country, must get to a point where we get a bipartisan approach. And I'm hoping we can get to that point. Because it is Wanjiku who is tired of all of this. Because turn it around. Assume, God forbid, assume NASA takes over. I'm telling you, the situation will be worse. First of all, they've been out of court for so long, like they say, okay, you know, you get a dry toast, okay, put it into some tea, it will draw more tea than a wet toast, okay? These guys have been out of court for so long. They'll come in and they'll say, oh, here we are now. So what I'm saying, Kenyans are tired. Let's get a bipartisan approach. Let's look at our constitution. Let's say areas where, yes, we became too independent. We want them to be independent so that you avoid any interruption from the, particularly from the executive. But they are now too independent. Let's have a midway position. I don't think right now this is a campaign. You know, I accuse you, you accuse me, and who accused more is the one who probably looks good. But Kenyans are tired. We need to get to a point where, like she is saying, a policeman can be arrested by a common mwananchi, taken to court, and put in jail or put in a box, throw it into the Indian Ocean, and close it forever.
And close that story. All right. I'll take a call from Margaret Sabatia, but we'll come back to that because we had reached a point where Kenyans had got to that point, but we lost it. But let me take a call from Margaret, who's calling from Sabatia. Good morning, Margaret. Thank you for calling. To your question or comment?
Michael.
Yes. Endelea kabisa na Kiswahili ni sawa. Lugha ya taifa.
Inaona mnaongea kuhusu habari ufisadi. Na hii maneno ya ufisadi iwe ni tukidi, iwe ni kodi, wote watu wenye waiko kwa NASA ufisadi, wako kwa Jubilee ufisadi. Na mufisadi ule ambaye anataka kuharibu nchi ya Kenya, inataka tunamumulika sana. Sio ati kufunika. Ukienda upande wa NASA, niliona juzi Amazon King watu wa kwake wakibeba matawi wakisema wanataka kujua pesa za kaunti zilienda wapi. Joshua alienda Mombasa akafunika hiyo maneno. Huyu mzee mwenye alichukua kiti ya kutawala Nairobi kama governor. Sasa mimi naongea upande wa NASA kwanza. Akaenda huko akafunika hiyo maneno. Mumiasi imefirisika mpaka sasa hivi watu tunalaumiana mambo ya Mumiasi, ambapo sasa Uhuru ndiye ameanza kupeleka katongolo kidogo kidogo huko, watu wakulima wapate pesa, wapate mali yao. Na ukirudi upande wa serikali, engineer Michael out, engineer nani out, walitolewa. Lakini ile kutolewa haitoshi, inatakana wakati huyo mtu ametajwa anapelekwa kotini, anashitakiwa. Haya, ukienda mzee kama Wetangula, Tokyo Japan, hajatuambia wakati alikuwa Minister ya Foreign Affairs, hizo pesa kuuza ubalozi wa Kenya Tokyo Japan zilifanya nini? Mimi nikisimama kama mwananchi wa Kenya katikati, sina upendeleo wa NASA, sina upendeleo wa nini. Mimi nataka Elizabeth Ongoro unijibu. Wewe umetaka kiti ya Kasarani, umenyimwa tikiti na ODM, umekimbia umekuja ANC, Kajwang' amepewa tikiti direct. Si ufisadi hiyo? Asante.
Asante sana, Margaret. Question to you, Senator. And okay, Michael from Mombasa. Let's take another call from Michael in Mombasa. We'll come back to Margaret's concerns. Michael in Mombasa, good morning, and to your question or comment. Michael, I can hardly hear you. Please speak up.
Yes.
Yes, go ahead.
Morning, Gitonga.
Yes, go right ahead, Michael.
Well, first of all, I'd like to comment about what I've just heard Mr. Weda, as a lawyer, said.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Weda, as a lawyer, actually has shocked the entire nation to sit on a national TV and say that there's nothing the president can do. That is totally false and misleading, because we understand that the president may not have a direct intervention on corruption, but there is an indirect intervention that has been provided for by the constitution of this country, that he can either constitute probably an independent body to investigate those who are failing their duties, whether it's a judge, whether it's an investigative body, and have them fired. So that is to say that the president cannot do anything is absolutely misleading, absolutely incorrect, and a scapegoat. And another thing, when you talk about the opposition being corrupt, yes, they may be corrupt, but the question is, who has the instruments to have them investigated and prosecuted? Because it's very shocking to hear people talking of cartels finding a campaign. We talk of governors looting, if they are doing so, and you have all these instruments and letting them go. So the question is, when do we start fighting corruption? At what point do you think that it is right to fight corruption? If you have the power to do whatever it takes to do, because we saw like the chair of the ESCC being bundled out, we saw even the deputy IG thrown out. I mean, we cannot have double standards here. We cannot have a time when the law is right for us to do something and when the law is wrong for us to do. I mean, the law should be, we cannot have double standards.
Thank you very much, Michael. Thank you, Michael from Mombasa. Let's take a call from Evans in Vihiga. Good morning, Evans, to your question or comment.
Bwana Michael, habari asubuhi.
Mzuri kabisa, Evans.
Nimekusikia ninakupata vizuri na mama huyo ambaye tunampenda.
Asanti.
Mimi ningependa kusema hivi. Tulikuwa na serikali ya muungano na maisha haikuwa magumu jinsi ilivyo kwa wakati huu. Ukiangalia wakati huu, wakati watu wanazaba kuhusu ufisadi katika nchi ya Kenya, ukiangalia serikali ya Jubilee ndio imeliti kwa ufisadi mwingi sana. Ukiangalia miradi ambao wanatangaza na kusema si miradi yao, ni miradi ambayo ilianzisha na serikali iliyopita ya muungano. Ukiangalia kitu kama serikali ya Jubilee walisema watapatia watoto laptop, na hiyo ndio ilikuwa manifesto yao ya kwanza kabisa, na watu wakapiga kura wakasema Jubilee ichukuliwe kwa maana inataka kupatia watoto wetu laptop. Na hiyo laptop mpaka wa saa hiyo wachapata, na wameingilia miradi mingine ambayo hata wa Kenya manifesto yao haikukua hivyo. Ukirudi kwa mambo ya ufisadi, ukiangalia ufisadi wakitacha mtu, unapata tu mtu ameiba mabilioni kama ana Ikuru, ameiba mabilioni mingi na hiyo mabilioni mingi haijarudi. Alafu ukiangalia mama kama huyu mama ambaye, unaona mama huyu ambaye mmekaa naye, ni mama ambaye tunataka wa mama kama huyo ambao watasimama na nchi ya Kenya na kutetea nchi ya Kenya. Ukiangalia mambo kama mama ambaye anatoka anasema serikali ya Jubilee upande ameletea Mumias. Ukiangalia Mumias imebaki jinsi ilivyokuwa. Haijaendelea, haijafanya chochote. Kwa hivyo ni vizuri mtu aseme ukweli. Jubilee imerudisha maisha ya Wakenya kuwa ngumu. Sisi kama wafanyakazi wa biashara ya kuchuna chai, tulipata bonus nzuri sana wakati serikali ya NASA. Lakini ukiangalia serikali ya Jubilee tunapata shilingi 6, 10, na wengine huko kama Nyeri wanapata shilingi 40 kwa kilo. Sasa tunashinda, hii ni nchi ya Kenya, Nyeri ni nchi gani na nchi ya Kenya upande wa Western ama upande wa serikali nyingine tunapata namna gani?
Aya, asante Evans. Thank you very much, Evans from Vihiga. And let me come back to the panel. Let me start with you, Senator. And there was a concern from Margaret in Sabatia. Now, Margaret's concern is the fact that, based on even what you had said, that if anyone is heavily implicated in corruption, then really there should be something that happens. But when we look at the NASA leaders, all of them at one time or the other have had questions or questionable deals that have been left pending. Isn't that something that maybe NASA should address even from within, so that they show or lead, from the front?
Let me just take you back to my first comment. And the president himself has been on live television and in newspapers stating and throwing his hands up in the air and saying, what can I do? Nitafanya namna gani? And the good lawyer here also concedes the president is not able to do anything. Now that he has conceded, and everybody who is supporting him says the president's hands are tied, he's not able to do anything. My question is, why is he seeking a second term? Why does he want to be re-elected? To continue doing nothing for another 5 years? You know, you cannot push the buck to somebody else. He is the CEO of this nation. And anytime anybody is looking for a job, even the list of the jobs, you know, you must know what it takes, what you are expected to deliver on that job, and you apply knowing very well and being convinced that you are able to deliver according to that mandate. Now that they all concede that the president cannot do anything, why can't he allow another Kenyan who has what it takes, who has accepted and known that he is going to do something, starting with corruption? At least he has never been given a chance to deliver. But the president promised us zero tolerance on corruption 5 years ago. And 5 years down the line, he has not done anything. It is now worse. And he keeps saying he cannot do anything about it. His hands are tied. Yet, he's campaigning every day to be given another 5 years and doing nothing. I still state, when you are the CEO of a nation, when you have the instruments of power, when the resources are with the government, when the structures of governance are with the government, and you state as a government, as the chief person heading that government, that your government is not able to do anything about corruption. And every other ill in this country can be traced back to corruption. Talk of insecurity. If we start that narrative, if you deal with corruption, by extension, you will be sorting out insecurity. Joblessness, jobs for the youth. How, when one person is taking 500 billion, where will we get the money to build industries or to attract investors by giving them concessions so that our youth can be employed? When you allow one person who has been implicated in, stealing 500 billion or something, and you're doing nothing about it. And you're actually telling the same people who are suffering the consequence that you're not able to do anything. Let us be honest and let us walk the talk. Once you actually concede that you're not able to execute a mandate
then
or continue,
office.
Yes, then you leave office. You vacate and you allow another person to be given a chance. At least let Kenyans know that these people have been wanting this chance for some time. Let us see what they're able to do if they are given that chance.
Whether
I think you cannot lead a country by the kind of propaganda here. Papa Joshua is promising us a Canaan of Chang'an and Busa. You can't allow such people to take over leadership. Now let's get to facts. Law now. The president, according to the current constitutional structure, has control on only people he has appointed to positions like me. He can sack me if he said I'm involved in corruption. But his role ends there. The other one is now the police, the DPP, and the judiciary. And when I go to the judiciary and I get injunction, there's very little the president can do. We are not going to handle the issues of corruption while we act in denial. We think the president has some immense, big rungus and power he can. Yet we look at the Constitution and everything was taken away from him.
So is it true that then what you're saying is that the president does not have the power to deal with corruption?
He does not have the power. The law, he doesn't have it. He only has on the people he has appointed. And which power does he have? To sack them. You remember the cabinet secretaries who were implicated. He sacked them. But it ended there. Ngil was taken to court. The court acquitted her. Other people would be taken to court. Others were even cleared by the DPP. Now, these other people want a jungle government where they think the president will do a Magufuli on people. He wakes up in the morning and he does. Even if Papa Joshua was to come with such kind of leadership, we will still go to court and stop him. Let us readdress the question. Where did we miss it in the new constitution so that we deal with the issue of corruption in a way that gives power to all the organs It is parliamentarians like her who are in parliament who are doing this legislation, jumping up and down. When they give themselves big salaries, they are very united. When it comes to fighting corruption, they were quiet. Now they are here blaming President Uhuru, who was not in parliament. On the question of laptops, somebody said they promised us 653,000 laptops have been so far distributed in over 13,000 primary schools, and the process is continuing. That is why President Uhuru is saying, kazi iendelee, so that the railway comes from Nairobi now to your home and to my home in Kisumu and into Busia. That's the work the president knows best. The legal work is left for the legal team. Do you understand, Mheshimiwa?
All right, let me hear from Dr. Jim.
I just wanted to say this. If it was that easy, if the instruments of power that we are having are so easy for the president to sack and jail anybody right, left, center.
Are you agreeing that the president
let me finish this, then you ask your question.
Okay. All right.
The first thing that the president, knowing the kind of a political environment we are in, the first thing that the president would have done is to jail the 3 dancers or the 4 dancers that he's talking about. Because they've been implicated in certain stories. They are giving him a headache, of course, in terms of competition. If it was that easy, okay, it would have been easy to go back to Tokyo. It would have been easy to go back to the graveyard. It would have been easy to go back to Mimias. A lot of these people would not be there if it was that easy. And it would have been very easy for President Uhuru to go in unopposed. But because it's not easy, and he knows very well that if he goes back to the Tokyo issue, it is in court. There is very little that he can do to move it faster. Okay? So let us not have this blame game. The system we are having, we got a constitution that wanted independent institutions.
To work.
And to work. And we have implemented it. 5 years down the road, let us now revisit that constitution without all of this accusation. If you ask me, actually we should say anybody who has been mentioned, this is not going to be constitutional. Anybody who has been mentioned on something, you should be the first to step out. And then we get a clean
And according
sweep.
to Chapter 6, really that's what should
yes,
happen,
but
they should absolve
Chapter
themselves.
6 was watered down, okay? It was watered down. It was to be a very, very strong part. But remember, even as we talk, and he's a lawyer, I'm not, at the Chapter 6, even if I'm I've been arrested on having been, involved in a corrupt deal, until you've taken me to court
And proved
guilty, you cannot stop me from contesting. In which case, then we are recycling all these kind of people because of the systems that we are operating on.
All right.
So let's leave politics alone. Let's look at the situation as it is.
Senator, what is it that the opposition would do, given the constraints that we have within the law, that the president cannot come out and say so-and-so should be arrested and put in jail? The court is there to do that.
Thank you very much.
What is it that the opposition would do?
Thank you very much. Let me start by commending Mr. Nyoro here in his statement that anybody who has been adversely mentioned in any corrupt deal or any corruption case should start by stepping down. So can we lead by example and have the deputy president show Kenyans what it takes to be a good leader?
Why don't you start with the Prime Minister?
You will allow me to comment. You will allow me to comment. Because I'm commenting.
The reason why I'm interjecting is because you're taking us back to the blame
No, I'm
game.
not taking you back.
Very well.
You will have to allow me to comment.
All right.
And to commend Mr. Nyoro for stating that anybody who has been adversely mentioned should step aside. And I'm simply commending him that we should lead by example and let other Kenyans, before the manager in an institution steps down, before an ordinary mwananchi steps down, can we have somebody who has been adversely mentioned, like the deputy president, step down, and then all Kenyans will then now, no, Mr. Nyoro himself has stated that. Secondly, the good lawyer here stated that unless legislation is changed to allow the president this or that, he's not able to act. Do you remember the infamous tyranny of numbers in Parliament? Do you also know that they passed almost every law that they wanted to pass in Parliament because of the tyranny of numbers that they enjoyed? How comes they did not find it right to introduce certain legislation that would strengthen certain institutions or give the president the powers that they're really happy about? Because they had the tyranny of numbers, both in the Senate and in the National Assembly. And back to your question now. Before I answer that, next time you invite somebody to represent NASA, remember, don't bring 2 Jubilee and 1 NASA.
I will let you know.
Bring 1 NASA
No. Before
and 1 Jubilee
and
somebody who is neutral. Let us start
we
on
had
a good
invited
slate.
an equal panel. We had
Yes.
Onyango Olo was supposed to be on set today. It is not our fault that he didn't come. It is not our fault that he didn't come. So we won't take blame for that.
Propaganda at NASA.
Having said that, Senator,
let me tell you.
Let me finish. Let me just get through with this question.
The Jubilee Brigade do not want to handle any facts or to put any facts on the table.
But does
and when
NASA
they are
want to handle facts?
when they are confronted with any facts, like the ones I've just put on the table, they then hide behind, the narrative of propaganda, which is neither here nor there.
But is NASA also hiding behind the propaganda of Jubilee having instruments of power? You've just said it, and this is the second time.
This is not propaganda.
It's the second time you've mentioned that those who are adversely mentioned should step down. Are there any in NASA that you think should step down? Let me start from there. Are there any within
let me
NASA?
tell you, I don't want to defend anybody. All I'm saying, if there is anybody who has been adversely mentioned,
including those in NASA,
everybody in NASA,
we have some.
Sisi Kwasisi,
Papa Joshua.
Everybody, let us start from the top CEO. And let us not, there's this thing, there's one day I was in the streets and somebody stole something, and when he was being chased, he started shouting, thief, 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 to confuse everybody. Let us not, this blame game thing that they're talking about, let us not make it a vicious circle. Let us at least present facts on the table.
My solution
now. Expect those
because
who
I was
really have been mentioned
I need to thank her.
to step aside.
Okay, we need to
because I was commended. Because I was commended, I need to thank her for commending me. If you look at the narrative of this thing, starting off with Kazi kwa Vijana, starting off with the Mescado that the Prime Minister
there you go
doing.
again, back to the blame
No,
game.
that's why I said, and I don't know why she rushed and talked about the DP, starting off with Tokyo, starting off with Graveyard, starting off, you Mumia Sugar.
Including the DP?
Yeah, what I'm saying is this thing is now, Kenyans should be able to take it up and say, let's have a bipartisan approach. It's now 35 days to election. It's now a blame game. Let's face it as Kenyans, have a bipartisan approach and say this is the way we are going to deal with it.
All right. Thank you very much, lady and gentlemen, for joining us on The Way It Is this morning, and a very heated debate right there regarding corruption. I don't know what you, as a Kenyan, feel is the solution, but from our leaders, it still seems to be a ping-pong game where the opposition will blame the government. Government will also say, look, you also have rotten apples within you, but we have to find a solution. That's the way it is this morning. Do stay with us right here on Morning Express. We've got some more stories that are making headlines coming up right here.